Tonight, funding restored for a national sport. Hockey Canada back on Ottawa's books. The immediate change by the federal government.
It's not a blank check. We still have a lot of expectations for hockey in Canada and for Hockey Canada.
As Canada faces off against America at the Women's World Championship. Sudan's political power struggle worsens as civilians desperately seek safety.
Many of them, they were hitchhiking in another vehicles to escape the city.
Plus, the deadly day at a Sweet 16 in Alabama.
It was chaotic. There was people running around everywhere, crying and screaming.
Children among those killed after gunfire erupts inside a dance studio.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo. Reporting tonight, Heather Butts.
Good evening. Hockey Canada scored a major victory tonight, regaining federal funding from Ottawa following a string of scandals. The announcement revealed just hours before the gold medal showdown at the Women's World Hockey Championship.
Back to Heisey. Hillary Knight's waist shot. She scores! The United States have taken the lead.
The game decided in the final minutes of the third period, but Team Canada just couldn't get it done. Falling to their arch rivals from the United States 6-3, Canada settling for silver. CTV's senior political correspondent Glenn McGregor starts us off.
USA! USA!
A familiar rivalry.
Go Canada, go! Go Canada, go!
The two dominant teams in women's hockey again battling for gold. The 21st time they faced off in the final game in 22 World Championships, with Canada gunning for its third consecutive title.
It is all or nothing now.
But even before the puck dropped, a major announcement from the federal sports minister, restoring government funding to Hockey Canada.
It's not a blank check.
Right.
We still have a lot of expectations for hockey in Canada and for Hockey Canada, and there's going to be close monitoring to make sure that they are moving in the right direction.
Federal support for the organization was suspended last year after reports that it paid out $8.9 million to settle sexual assault claims. Sponsors withdrew, and politicians denounced Hockey Canada's resistance to accepting responsibility.
It boggles the mind that Hockey Canada is continuing to dig in its heels.
On the ice tonight, veteran captain Marie-Philippe Poulin opened the scoring. But the U.S. evened it up.
Murphy delayed, she scores!
Then, seesawing lead changes.
Another shot, she scores! It's up for Knight! She scores! She scores! Well, there's a shot, she scores!
In a sometimes physical and chippy game, a pair of penalties late in the third period led to two quick U.S. goals.
It's over. The United States is back on top.
The sports minister says restoration of funding to Hockey Canada comes with conditions, but is necessary to properly support athletes like those on the ice tonight in Brampton. Heather.
Glenn, thank you. Hockey fans are also primed and ready for the NHL playoffs, with 3 Canadian teams chasing the Stanley Cup. Today, the Edmonton Oilers hit the ice for their last practice before their playoff opener Monday, and the Toronto Maple Leafs and Winnipeg Jets begin their postseason push on Tuesday. In Sudan, the power struggle between two military rivals pushed on for a second day, despite immediate calls for a ceasefire. The chaos now sending the death toll over 50, while the injured is estimated to be near 1,000. SCTV's Jean-Pierre Vauchman tells us the escalating tensions have left those in the country on edge.
Told to shelter in place, many Sudanese chose instead to try and escape from the capital. They're without water, electricity, and under constant threat of artillery and gunfire.
Just sounded like gunshots, and there's a lot of chaos going on.
The UN had brokered a 3-hour pause in fighting to allow for humanitarian aid, but residents reported shots never fully stopped. And the number of dead and injured is rising rapidly. Both fighting factions have vowed not to negotiate or to cease fire despite mounting diplomatic pressure. The conflict erupted after months of escalating tensions between two military powers, the Sudanese Army and their Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, and their powerful generals. Once allies who joined forces for a coup in 2021, they're now enemies jostling for power.
The economy has gone into a free fall as international donors have suspended their assistance to Sudan under this coup government.
And this alarming turn has dimmed hopes of a path to democracy and return to international funds. This while a third of Sudan faces food insecurity, according to the UN's World Food Program. And it has now halted work in the country after 3 of its aid workers were killed in the violence. At an Arab League emergency meeting, Egypt was among a long list of countries urging for a ceasefire, warning of unpredictable consequences. RSF had claimed to have wrestled control over 90% of strategic sites in the capital. But the Sudanese army called that a lie and said it had regained some key facilities. It also issued a video showing what it claims are RSF soldiers, saying they'd surrendered to the military forces and urged others to follow suit. Many had long feared this violent crisis that could destabilize not just Sudan, but much of the region. Heather.
Thanks, Geneviève. A former Indian politician convicted of kidnapping was shot dead on live television. Atiq Ahmed, along with his brother Ashraf, were being escorted by police to a medical checkup and were speaking to reporters when a gun was pulled. 3 men posing as journalists were taken into custody. The Ahmed brothers were alleged to be kingpins in a local criminal organization. The shooting comes just 3 days after Atiq's son was killed by police. Celebration turned to tragedy in Alabama when gunshots rang out at a Sweet 16 birthday party, killing or wounding nearly 30 people. It was one of several mass shootings this weekend in the U.S. as the epidemic of gun violence grows. In the first 106 days of the year, the country has recorded at least 161 mass shootings. That's more than 1.5 every day. As CTV's Richard Madden reports, this deadly weekend comes as the powerful U.S. gun lobby gathers for its annual convention.
Another deadly weekend of gun violence in America.
Oh my God.
Police in the small town of Dadeville, Alabama, rushed to a dance hall around 10:30 Saturday night after someone opened fire at a teenager's Sweet 16 birthday party. Authorities haven't named a suspect or motive.
There were 4 lives tragically lost in this incident, and there's been a multitude of injuries.
Officials say the shooter injured nearly 30 people, mostly teenagers, and many are in critical condition. One of those killed, Phil Dowdle, a promising football star who won a university scholarship, fatally shot at his own sister's birthday party.
Somehow I walked in with a gun and just opened up fire, for no reason. Nice party, nice family.
That same night in Louisville, Kentucky, 2 more were killed, another 4 injured when shots were fired into a crowd at an outdoor park. Police say they don't have a suspect or motive at this time.
For this community, this is every night. This is not okay. This has to change. We can talk about the politics of guns. We can talk about mental health issues. We can talk about the breakdown of the family. It's all of it.
America's Gun Violence Archive says there were 6 other mass shootings nationwide on Saturday alone, from Arizona to New Jersey.
Valuable than your gun.
That escalating violence brought protesters outside the NRA's annual meeting, frustrated over the lack of safety laws. But inside, Republican presidential hopefuls are selling their pro-gun agendas.
I was proud to be the most pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment president you've ever had in the White House.
I am a concealed weapons permit holder myself.
GOP contenders are dismissing tougher gun laws, instead pushing for more mental health resources and armed guards in schools.
If you're going to protect children, you need to have armed personnel to protect the children.
In a statement, President Joe Biden called these weekend shootings outrageous and unacceptable, adding a tragic reminder that guns are the leading killer of children in America. Heather.
Richard Madden in Washington. Police in Montreal are investigating 2 cases of suspected arson in the city's West Island early this morning. One involved a burning vehicle in a residential driveway. The other caused significant damage to a trucking business.
More than one suspect would have been seen near the scene just before the fire started. So the Montreal Police Arson Unit investigators will go on the scene.
10 trucks in the parking lot of a local business were completely destroyed by flames. No one was injured. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly started 3 days of intense talks with her G7 counterparts in northern Japan. Plenty of hot topics are on the agenda, including an explosive attack on Japan's Prime Minister, amplifying angst in the prelude to next month's summit. CTV's Rahim Ladani reports.
The sound of children playing violin filled the mountainous air as world foreign ministers arrived in Karuizawa, Japan, to discuss some of the most pressing crises facing the world.
They bring together a whole set of experiences, and because they're comfortable with one another, they basically lay the agenda on the foreign affairs side for the leaders.
Among the topics being discussed, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, China's increasing military pressure on Taiwan, and North Korea's nuclear aggression.
Hi. Good to see you.
Canada's Melanie Joly is among the ministers in attendance for the 3 days of meetings, which began with a private working dinner. On her agenda is also likely the topic of climate and renewable energy.
We can see that there are differences among these countries as well. Canada was pushing for an end to the use of coal, and the foreign ministers could not agree on that.
A small group of protesters gathered to meet the diplomats, waving the Japanese and Ukrainian flags. Security is on high alert a day after a young man threw an explosive device toward Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on the eve of the foreign minister's arrivals. Kishida was uninjured, but the attack is an unwanted development as a debate over protection lingers following the assassination of former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe 9 months ago.
I think there are limits unless you're going to put the Prime Minister behind a glass wall and cut off contact with the general public, which Japanese politicians are certainly not typically interested in doing.
Japan says safety will be a top priority when the G7 leaders arrive for the summit next month in Hiroshima. Rahim Ladani, CTV News, Toronto.
More than 100 Ukrainian prisoners of war were released from Russian captivity and returned home to mark Orthodox Easter. The trade took place over several days as part of the Great Easter Exchange, though it's unclear how many Russian soldiers were sent back. Meanwhile, Orthodox Ukrainians across the country, including those in liberated regions, celebrated by blessing traditional Easter baskets. Orthodox Ukrainians in this country also celebrated the religious holiday, as many newcomers mark their first Orthodox Easter in Canada since fleeing their war-torn homes following Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year. Coming up after the break, a memorial space flight.
This just was such a fitting thing. It just made so much sense for who he was and what he loved.
A final resting place among the stars. Plus, bidding farewell to the Phantom on Broadway. The world's most powerful rocket is getting set for liftoff. SpaceX's massive Starship rocket is scheduled to blast into orbit tomorrow morning out of South Texas. The uncrewed test flight, designed to eventually fly humans to the moon, will circle the Earth before splashing down off the coast of Hawaii. NASA plans to use SpaceX's Starship as part of the Artemis 3 mission to put humans back on the lunar surface. With companies like SpaceX making celestial travel more accessible, a new side industry is emerging. It is now possible to have your loved one buried in space, giving them their moment in the heavens. CTV's Nicole DiDonato explains.
And liftoff of Transporter 7.
This SpaceX Falcon 9 launch over the weekend watched around the world with a Calgary connection.
It was amazing to watch it happen, you know? I mean, to watch any rocket launch is amazing.
This launch was different. Sue Weber's husband was on board, but not in the traditional way. Tyson Gerald Sorge died last year at age 53. His ashes a small but meaningful part of the payload on board the Transporter 7 mission.
When you're diagnosed with cancer at such a young age, you know, you miss out on so many of the things that you had planned to do.
This trip honors those plans. Sorge spent many nights with his wife tracking satellites, watching rocket launches, and debating which Star Trek series was the best. Sorge brought his passion for technology to 6 continents, working on communication equipment for mining and oil and gas. He passed on those technical skills to his 3 children.
This just was such a fitting thing. It just made so much sense for who he was and what he loved.
Memorial space flight company Celestis is behind this. Flight capsules with the ashes of Sorge and others are attached to a satellite that will orbit the Earth for 5 to 10 years.
Our participants aren't just riding on that satellite. They're actually participating in this real space mission. Actually serves a purpose on that satellite as a ballast for weight and balance.
Loved ones can track their location in real time. The company says popularity is growing as both access to space and cremation rates significantly rise.
I'm really proud that we can come in and do that and make space accessible to the normal person.
Costs range from $3,000 to $13,000, but for many families, the experience is priceless.
He would be over the moon, just beside himself with excitement.
Sorge's final adventure is to descend to Earth and burn up with the appearance of a shooting star. Nicole DiDonato, CTV News, Calgary.
Still ahead, the Montreal group on the mend. Upcyclers giving new life to old clothing, one stitch at a time. You reap what you sow has a whole new meaning in Montreal, where a group is on a mending mission to keep textile waste out of landfills. CTV's Vanessa Lee explains.
It's perhaps the last thing you would expect in a downtown Montreal restaurant and bar. This is known as Mending Night. People can bring their clothes that need repairs or learn how to patch them up.
We have kind of like a fur coat getting worked on right now. Lots of pants, lots of holes in pants. What's the why? It's like
Cameron Moore started this monthly event back in the fall as he tries to revive an age-old tradition.
I was really lucky. My grandma and my mom taught me how to sew when I was really young, but I think that a lot of people lost that. And it used to be common knowledge. Like, I think this is much more of a regular thing a long time ago.
Those who have mastered the art of needle and thread aren't just saving beloved garments. They're keeping them out of landfills. Textile waste is a growing problem, with clothes cheaper than ever as consumers choose fast fashion.
There are so many young people here. What do you think that says?
I think that's really an indication that people are interested in this, and people maybe are becoming more aware of the problems that are out there and wanting to be a part of solutions.
I think it's super important to remember the value that's the physical labor and you know, these sorts of things that are going into the clothes. You're going to put it directly through that same.
27-year-old Riley Swan is certainly gaining new appreciation.
I'd never sewed before, no, and he basically taught me how to like sew a seam and like fix a hole in this collar.
What would your mom, what would your grandmother say, you know, if they knew that you were here?
I think they'd be proud.
Breaking the cycle of consumption and giving clothes a second life.
It's beautiful.
Vanessa Lee, CTV News, Montreal.
This next video might have you looking over your shoulder after a man in North Carolina had a surprise guest stroll into his driveway. David Oppenheimer was relaxing in his chair, scrolling through his phone when he came face to face with a curious black bear. They both got a pretty good scare. The bear ran away after a few seconds of intense eye contact. And fans said goodbye tonight to Broadway's longest-running show.
The phantom of the opera is there inside my mind.
After 35 years and nearly 14,000 performances, Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom of the Opera took its final Broadway bow. Producers say with soaring production costs and waning ticket sales, it was impossible to keep going. Phantom debuted in 1988 and has won more than 70 awards. After the break, the healing journey, showcasing music as the best medicine.
Love Shack, baby.
We leave you tonight with a story of song and how music led a young BC boy on an artistic journey following a devastating diagnosis. CTV's Adam Sawatsky explains.
As Kelly Milite looks back on her son Osher's past, she remembers how her 10-year-old would ask to go to the thrift store by himself so he could buy a blazer.
He's always been his own little dude.
When he wasn't curating vintage clothes, Osher was doing stand-up comedy at birthday parties.
This kid has a sense of timing that I could not replicate if I tried.
But then Osher's mental health started unexpectedly suffering. None of the usual treatments seemed to help, although gardening with his mom always made him smile.
The daffodils that you see out front, he and I planted together that fall.
That was before the day Osher suffered that excruciating headache, lost control of the right side of his body, was rushed to hospital, and diagnosed with having a cancerous brain tumor.
We didn't know if he was going to make it. I thought that's what all I was going to have left, were those daffodils.
Osher never saw the flowers bloom that spring. He was in the midst of treatments at multiple hospitals for more than 8 months, and although he was left unable to move his left side or answer simple yes or no questions.
What could you do?
I could sing.
Let it be, let it be.
Although Osher couldn't recall his age, he could sing every lyric to every one of his favorite songs.
Love Shack, baby.
The doctors urged Kelly to contact a certified music therapist.
Hello.
And Osher started working with Supriya Calathil-Crocker.
We know that music touches the brain instantly, quickly, and across the board.
After several months of working with Supriya, Osher's mental health is flourishing, his body's begun moving, and after the latest diagnosis from his doctor,
I got the news today.
is writing his first song.
I beat cancer, hooray.
When I focus on how far he's come, it's amazing. He's accomplished so much.
I'm getting stronger every day.
Although Osher is just beginning his healing journey, Kelly couldn't be more grateful. It includes caring professionals, a stop to appreciate their blooming flowers, and a soundtrack filled with hopeful hits.
And bring your jukebox money.
Adam Sawatsky, CTV News, Victoria.
Love Shack, baby.
The power of music. I'm Heather Butts for Sandy and all of us here at CTV National News. Thank you for watching. Omar Sachedina will be here tomorrow. Good night.